Look, let me start by saying this plainly. Marriage is a sacred bond, not just between a man and a woman, but between both of them and God. And breaking that bond is serious. It should never be casual and it should never be celebrated. I believe that without hesitation. And no, I'm not talking about people who had an affair, checked out long ago, and decided they were willing to burn their marriage down to chase a new relationship. That story almost always ends the same way. We've all seen it. That's not what this is. No. What I'm talking about are the people who stayed, those who endured, who tried, who prayed, who swallowed their pride and told themselves, if I just do better, this will get better. People who lived for years under constant mental and emotional erosion, the kind that doesn't leave bruises, doesn't make headlines, but slowly convinces you that you are the problem, that you are unlovable, that you are trapped. Now, before I go any further, I want to be clear about something. I'm not speaking about this casually. I didn't arrive at any of these thoughts comfortably. The whole process of writing the script was actually quite painful. And it's because I'm speaking from lived experience. You see, I ended a marriage that lasted 21 years. At the time, we had a 12-year-old son. He's 20 now. That decision wasn't abstract. It wasn't academic. And it was not made lightly. It came with consequences, predictable ones, legal, financial, emotional. Yes, I eventually entered another relationship, and yes, I eventually got remarried. And just recently, my wife and I welcomed our third son together. I don't share that to justify anything. I share it so you understand the full arc of my background, in which qualifies me to talk about this topic. You see, because I've lived the rupture, I've lived the aftermath, I've lived the guilt, the rebuilding, the mistakes, the responsibility that followed. I stood in the courtrooms, I signed the contracts, I've made the payments, I've navigated the visitation schedules. I've learned, often the hard way, how your decisions echo long after the papers are filed. So when I speak about faith, marriage, children, legacy, I'm not doing it from a place of moral superiority, like some people. I'm doing it as someone who knows that survival doesn't end when the marriage does. It only changes form. As much as I respect conservative voices like Matt Walsh or Michael Knowles, I'll say this honestly. When it comes to people who decide to leave marriages like this, the tone is often brutal, actually. There's little curiosity, little grace, little acknowledgement of what it actually costs someone to reach that decision. They're quick to remind us of the pain we've caused our children, as if that wasn't the single heaviest weight we carried every single day leading up to that moment. As if we weren't already thinking to ourselves, am I destroying my kids by staying or by leaving? What rarely gets said, what desperately needs to be said, is this. Some people don't leave because they stopped believing in marriage. They leave because they were starting to believe their children might someday find them dead. That's not a theoretical sentence. That's a lived one. And when a person reaches that point, the moral math changes. Not because vows don't matter, but because life does. This is for a very specific group of people. I'm making this video for the men and women, or the men and the women who were married for decades, who didn't leave at the first sign of difficulty, who didn't walk away when things became inconvenient or unfulfilling. This is for the men and women who stayed long enough to know the difference between a hard season and a harmful pattern. Sometimes go see a therapist isn't the solution. Not because therapy is useless, but because therapy assumes is still a shared commitment to honesty, self reflection, and change. When one person refuses to engage in that work, therapy becomes a holding pattern. Sometimes it becomes a place where dysfunction is explained instead of corrected. And sometimes, quietly, painfully, the healthiest thing a person can do is leave. What makes this harder is that many of the people whose opinions we respect the most will never understand that decision. They speak confidently, armed with studies, statistics, cite outcomes, trends, and averages, but they aren't living inside the marriage. They don't hear the conversations that never change. They don't feel the cumulative weight of being diminished slowly over time. So when they mock, when they moralize, when they reduce a life-altering decision to a talking point, well, it says more about the limits of their perspective than it does about the people who chose to survive. What no one really prepares you for is what happens after the decision is made, after the court date, after the paperwork, after the signatures are filed, after the payments are scheduled. There's a strange quiet that follows. On paper, everything is resolved. In real life, almost nothing feels settled. If you leave a marriage later in life, this can be especially disorienting. You're not starting over at 25. You're starting over with history, with children, with obligations, with stress your body now carries differently. And almost immediately your thoughts turn to your kids. Visitation time, custody schedules, divided into fractions, birthdays negotiated like treaties. And then comes the question no one likes to answer for you, right? I mean, what do you do with these visitation times? The first few months are, awkward, sometimes painfully so. You want to make every moment count. And that pressure alone can steal the joy out of those visitations with your children. You're afraid of doing too much. You're afraid of doing too little. You're afraid of getting it wrong. All the while, you're carrying your own grief. There's no manual for this stage. No study captures it. No podcast prepares you. No confident voice on the internet tells you how to rebuild a life while still tethered emotionally and financially to one that no longer exists. So if you feel unmoored during this time, that doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. It means you're human. If you're hearing this and you're a Christian, as I am, and you find yourself in conflict with what you've done, listen carefully. Regardless of what commentators say, you've chosen your path. It's done. That doesn't mean it was ideal. It doesn't mean it was what God's first desire for your life was. But it also doesn't mean you are forever condemned. You will not be judged solely by the moment you broke something. You will, however, be judged by what you do from here forward. By whether you choose integrity over bitterness, by whether you show up for your children with humility instead of resentment, by whether you take responsibility for the pain you caused without letting the shame hollow you out. God doesn't ask you to live forever inside your worst moment. And if in time you find someone new to walk through life with, proceed carefully. Do it with God as your guiding light, not as a justification you invoke after the fact. Bring the lessons you learned, not the wounds you're still bleeding from. Your past does not automatically belong in your future. So share it only when it adds wisdom, clarity, or depth, not when it serves as armor or comparison. And finally, marriage, faith, children, and legacy are not separate compartments of a life. They are the same story told over time. You may not be able to rewrite how earlier chapters of your life unfolded, but you are still responsible for how the story is told from here on. Let your faith be evident not in what you argue, but in how you live. Let your children see consistency where there was once chaos, humility where there was once pride, presence where there was once fear. And when your life is eventually measured, not by courts, commentators, or even your own regrets, let it be said that you chose responsibility over resentment, presence over pride, and faithfulness in the chapters you were still given. Not for yourself, but for your children. That is not failure. That is legacy.